Welcome to the Surfcast Podcast. We got another special episode here today. We've got a guest on board here. We got Jimmy Fee from On the Water. Very widespread angler. I mean, Jimmy, you do everything from freshwater to offshore and, of course, surf fishing, which is why we're having you here on the Surfcast Podcast today. So thank you very much for taking some time out of your day to join us.
Oh, thank you guys, man. I'm pumped to be on here.
Yeah, we're really excited you're here. Everybody sees you and on the water doing this, that, and the other thing. A lot of guys don't realize that surfcasting is really in your soul. It's one of your deep passions. So speaking of passions, you have a long and storied history with Sand Beach, which is going to be sort of our topic today when we talk to you and interview you. I know one of your 50s actually came from the sand. Is that right?
Yeah, that was the first one.
Okay, so can you tell us that story to get us started?
Yeah, it was mid-July, and it was fishing. It was a piece of structure that had some good fish throughout the season. And I knew there were big ones there. I'd lost a couple big ones, and then it lined up. It was like a light crosswind there. Like I remember those details. Like I don't keep a great log. Like I keep an Excel sheet it's a soulless log, I call it. It's like just data that you can then sort by wind direction, see like where was it good on this wind. But that one, like I remember all the detail. Of course, you remember the details of that. But crosswind, was fishing a good sized needlefish. It was a knockoff of a Habs needlefish that had a little extra weight in it, so some extra casting distance. Pretty good sweep. It was a new moon, and I remember that fish I cast up current. It was a bar that dropped into a cut, a pretty good sized bowl. And the fish would, go right up to the edge of the bar, cast on top of the bar, swept it in, and the fish hit like right where it was supposed to be. And it was a tremendous, the fight was great. The first run wasn't a really long run. Like he took a lot of line, couldn't stop him. But then the stalemate, like he just stopped and held and you couldn't make any ground. And that happens in the canal. It happens in the canal with like a 20-pound fish, but they're out on an open beach where there's not as much sweep. When it does that, like that's when you start to go, you start to, your heart gets to flutter. And I remember hearing like the line whining in the wind, that sound like when you have the rod rigged up and like the wind's going through. I remember hearing that. And then it took another run where it really did dump a lot of line. And like my instinct was to like crank the drag down because you kind of hit panic mode a little bit. Like I still do that. I still hit panic mode. But I bent out hooks on a nice fish a year or two before that. And I remember like I came in and the guy I was with, my friend, he goes, "Why did you bother?" He goes, "There's nothing it's going to run into out here. Like there was no reason for you to try to stop, like just let it go." So that's what I did. I eventually fought it in. And then it was right behind kind of the beach lip there. And I couldn't, like it just, again, it hunkered down and like could not pull it. And he just kind of had to wait for him to do something. Like I was worried if I pulled too much, and I did feel like a pop where like one of the hooks let out. And when I finally got him up there, I got my hands on it, and I could tell like he was enormous. He was long. He wasn't tremendous. I didn't measure him like lengthwise, but he was fat. He was as big around as like a, I could put my hand in there like that, wide open, and in his mouth and his head. So he was really well built. The same fish at that length could have been a 42-pound fish, but this one just happened to be extraordinarily fat. And it was 54 pounds. And all along I was saying like, I'm going to keep the first one. I'm going to keep my first 50. Like I do not keep a lot of striped bass, never kept a lot of striped bass. And I wanted a skin mount of one. Like that was the thing. I wanted to have a fish. Like I wanted its imperfections on there. Like if it had messed up stripes, if it had a scar, if the tail fin was messed up, I wanted that. I didn't want a fiberglass replica because I didn't feel like that would be my fish. And I know fiberglass replicas are beautiful. They're great, but I wanted, I've been looking for that fish for so long. Like I wanted all that, but in the end, I couldn't do it. I was like looking at the fish. It was still strong and thrashing. Like it wasn't bleeding. One of the prongs of the treble hook on the belly had broken. So it was just the tail hook that was still in the fish. And so the plug itself was pretty beat up, and I ended up keeping like that. I retired, and it actually hangs on a painting of the jetty where I caught my first striped bass in Ocean City, New Jersey. Like my parents got that for me when I was little. It was my first surf striper in 1999 or 98. And they bought that painting for me when I was a little bit older. And like, that's where I have the plugs I retire on that one. So that's where that plug is.
That's amazing. What an awesome story.
Yeah.
I'm with you. Oh man, the breaking of the treble. That's brutal.
It was a 6X VMC, like a 306X VMC. And I'm not a big like 6X guy. Like I still use a lot of 4X, and people are like, well, you're playing with fire. But with stuff like needlefish or the dock where you have a longer plug where they'll get a lot of leverage, like that's where you definitely need a 6X. I'm playing with some BKK stuff now too, getting with a little bit of those, but that was a 6X. So they tend to break before they bend in a lot of cases. It seems
Yes,
like.
that's right. That's been my experience
Yeah.
too. I know. Toby hates that I also use the 4X still quite a bit.
Very
too.
limited use for me.
It's one of my biggest hypocrisies. I know. I say, it's something I say, do as I say, not as I do. It's one of my biggest hypocrisies. So Jimmy, you said something really interesting. So thank you for sharing the story because it's amazing.
Yeah.
Because I was right there with you. Man, if I saw that broken hook, my heart would have been in my throat. I probably would have just passed out for a second, blacked out, and then came back like, it's okay, it's still here, you did it, whatever. But you said something really interesting, and that's that you said that there was a piece of structure that had been there for a while. And that's something that I think a lot of anglers either assume is always true, that like, oh, the structure's there, it's there, or they assume, it's changing constantly. It's an interesting thing you observed. Do you find that a particular stretch of a beach or a particular piece of structure fishes better if it's there consistently? If it sort of stays all summer or it sort of shows up in the same place each year? Do you see that?
You know what? It's funny. I have these places, and I hope that the structure is going to be a certain way, because I know in the past when it's set up in this, you can go there and you look and you see like one, for example, is like a big triangle bar with then an outer bar. And when it's set up like that, which it doesn't do every year, I know it's on. Dude, there's a great funnel between that one sandy point and the bar, and the fish they get in there. So I think it's more about how the structure looks and how it's set up more than how long it's been there. Obviously, you want it there for 1 or 2 nights isn't going to do it, but if it's the right, they're going to find it. Like that's
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be there for a whole season or multiple seasons. Like the fish are going to get on that good piece of structure if it's there. I don't think it needs to be there for super long.
So do you think there are specific pieces of structure that coincide with specific places? So what I mean is, without getting into any specifics about spot, in some of my sand beach situations, there are certain beaches that fish well with a trough or a bar or a point or these, what I call like in-outs, a variety of different things. And it's like, this beach fishes best with this, and this fish best with this. Do you feel that too? Do you have like beach by structure? You know what I mean?
There are definitely beaches where they tend to get just whatever it is in the coastline creates certain types of structure on them. When you find them there, it's going to be on. Like there's one beach, and I know Toby has a great history with this beach too, going back probably 20, 22 years. We've talked about that in the past, where it is just the most dramatic piece of structure. Like it was my first trip to Cape Cod ever. Like this must have been 2001, 2002. And went to Blackbeard's Bait and Tackle, and they were just like, yeah, go here and try some eels. And I was bridge fishing and fishing the beaches of South Jersey, which are flat as anything. Like they replenish them almost every year, it seems like. So you don't get a lot of structure. You've got to fish closer to the inlets to see any real beach structure down there. So I'm just kind of like thrown to this beach being like, well, do I just fish at the foot of the parking lot? I'm like, well, let me at least walk. I drove 8 hours here. Let me walk 5 minutes down the beach. And like, even I realized, like, I'm like, holy, like this is the spot here. You can see there's a big beach scarp. And then you could just see like everything funneled into this bowl. And we caught bluefish there. It was me and my dad. We caught bluefish there until dark. And then after dark, he hooks a fish. And like, this is what made me love sand beach fishing forever. He hooks a big fish. And I just remember the wave washed it up and left it behind. And you just look at this. It was like a 40-pound bass, probably close to 4 feet long. And we're looking at that. And like at first you just see the lump and he goes, is that a shark? I'm like, I don't think so. I think it's a striper. We ran down, and like for the rest of the night, we caught a couple of other, that was the biggest, but some other nice fish. But that feeling of seeing the wave wash the thing up and then leave it behind, and going down and seeing the size of that lump on the sand, it's what I love about like that. Give me that feeling. Like, catching them in boulder fields is great. Canals great. And it's great. But, sliding them up to you and grabbing them like that, that's all great. But when you have to deal with that last hurdle at the end of the last wave, it makes it so much more enjoyable,
Yeah.
and more stressful.
Yeah, I was just thinking that's like the most stressful piece of sand fishing is that end game. When it's there, you haven't grabbed it, you're close enough where you could. I've lost more small fish, let alone big fish at that point.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't happen in the rocks like that. The rocks are going to lose them early on. It's then you move on, whatever. Yeah, sand, it's like you go through all of it and you lose it right at the end.
It seems like they'll roll over in the rocks sometimes, and like they'll tire out and you can glide them to you. In the sand, it's like they feel the sand under their belly and freak out. They do like Cheech calls it Anthony DeCicci, who I work with, calls it the Star of David, like where they're doing this in the water. I always call it the washing machine, but they just kind of start doing that, and that's when the hooks pull. If you've got too much tension on there, but it is that last like great. It's Heartbreak Hill, in the marathon.
Yeah. So how do you handle that? How do you handle that last little bit? Do you back off? Do you go easier? Like, what do you do? What do you do when you got a big fish? You got to get through that last wave.
I like a lighter touch, man. Like you're not gonna. You might tire out this fish and beat this fish. You're not gonna beat the ocean. So you need to sit there and wait for the right wave to go and just wash him up, and then once he's up there, just holding tight enough that you can keep him where you can run down and get him.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. So. Yeah. So you're saying you really do time it out. There's no muscling. There's no like going, I'll go easier, but I'll still try to tow. You're really gonna let the water do the work for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, that's a good tip. I like to just back up too. I think a lot of anglers don't do that. Where if you get kind of close and then the wave's gonna take the fish up, just don't reel. Just back up with the wave. Just keep going. Just pull, and that way you can adjust a lot without trying to crank. I think that works well.
And the main benefit of that too is you're keeping a better angle on it.
That's
with
right.
The rod too. If as that fish gets closer, that rod angle gets so much more dramatic. You're lifting his head up as opposed to pulling the fish out.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the smarter thing to do, is to back up. But then you have to do like the faster scurry down to the beach.
Yes, then you got to scurry.
Secure the bag there,
Because that next wave, I've lost fish too, where you're backing up, the hook pulls out, and then you're sprinting at the fish trying to get there to get it, especially if it's a nice fish. And I had one in particular I've lost that I think about fairly regularly where that happened. It's brutal. It can be really brutal.
But like that's a good way too. If we're trying to, like, you're trying to cover your tracks in the surf, like, there's people on a beach. I've seen guys doing the dance up and down. I'm like, oh, that dude's trying to land a fish right now. As I'm glancing up and down, watching on the beach. So it's like, I do it still, and I know I'm giving away, but there's times you have to.
Oh yeah, you got to do. Oh man, the old timers were crazy about how they would conceal the beach. Like people would have brooms, like on Cape Cod back in the day. They would go, because they said, I don't know if Frank talked about this with you guys, but like they would leave a very distinct tail drag up to the truck when you had a big fish, and guys would go out of their way to brush that. No evidence is left on the rocks, but it could be on the sand if you're not too careful.
Yeah, it's wild. So Jimmy, going back a little bit, because we already got into some more detailed stuff, but with all your experience and stuff, I'm interested to hear, if I wanted to get started fishing sand beaches, what's the biggest piece of advice or a couple pieces of advice that you would offer? Like if I am sort of doing it, or I'm interested in it, or maybe I'm not having the performance I wish I did, like what are some tips that you would give an angler?
I mean, the advice everybody always gives is like go at low tide during the day and look at it. And yes, that's very important, but you need to go there when there's actually some wave action too. Like it could be low tide and flat calm, and you're not going to see nearly as much. You need the waves and how they behave to kind of reveal what's there structure wise. And then that's important. And I think that the beach, at least for me, it was this way. Like reading beach structure, it was one of those things that just clicked in. Like it wasn't, I slowly got it. Like all of a sudden I knew you look at it enough and you're like, oh, you recognize it. And then, but you got it. It's as easy as riding a bike going down there. Be like, oh, so it's just getting out there with some wave action, being able to see like, okay, that's the bar. Oh, here's some darker wood, flatter water. That's where it's calm. And then you're able to go and look at any other beach you go on and get a good idea, as long as there's something, some moving water to tell you what's below.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's good. So you're saying basically you got to get out there and fish it and sort of pick it apart. Is casting important? So like when you're learning the structure, because you just mentioned you really got to learn it and it kind of clicks one day. Can you get that observation from just looking and observing, or do you use a plug or a particular set of plugs to kind of learn it? Have you ever done that kind of thing?
I know there are guys that do that. There are guys that seem to have this kind of like sixth sense. They know exactly what their lure is doing. I've never had that level of feel for it. Like I would love to I'm going to put a bucktail on and read the bottom like Braille, and I'm going to know what's there. That's just not in my skill set. So I'm much better at, I can see, I'm better at reading the water. Like, even anywhere, you can read current seams, like going into, I think you and I talked about this when we did the surf seminar a few years ago, like looking at things on a smaller scale, like a trout stream is a great microcosm of like what's happening in the surf and how water moves. And if you can recognize the seams and things there, you can then put that into the bigger, the bigger arena of surf fishing.
Yeah, I remember at the time you were saying you felt like steelheading had actually taught you a lot, and you'd sort of translated a lot of the stuff you learned there into the surf.
Yeah. Oh, definitely, man.
It was super important to you. That's funny. You mentioned something too. There needs to be some wave action to sort of more learn the sand beach structure. Are you looking for a lot of that? Are you looking for, because I know like a lot of guys on Long Island, it's like live or die by whitewater. It's like their entire lives. But I know a lot of anglers in New England who even sometimes whitewater can be a negative because it can coincide with bad wind. Let's put it that way. So are you a big whitewater guy? Are you looking for the wave action?
It's dependent on the time of year and what's happening with the fish. There's times in the fall when you have a ton of small bait and they get it jammed up into that whitewater, and that is exactly what you're looking for. For the most part, midsummer, I'm looking to pick off, you're looking for smaller groups of bigger fish. I don't find it being nearly as productive as, kind of a more moderate, I like moderate surf. It seems to be the better surf, light to moderate, not too flat, but enough to give the bass a reason to be there too. Because if that water's not moving through there, it's not flushing the sand eels or whatever the bait is off the bar into the troughs, and they're going to be somewhere else. They're going to be farther off eating. So I don't. Whitewater to me is like blitz fishing. It's a different type of. It's great when there's a ton of fish there, but if you're just going out on a regular night looking for bass that are already in a pattern, it's not going to do you any favors.
Would obviously saying the whitewater to a degree is a part of what you look for. I mean, if you showed up at the beach, you thought it was going to be these conditions, produce it. If it's dead flat calm on the sand, I mean, is that like total heartbreak? You bailing? You just give it a shot? How do you feel if that? Because we all screw the weather up, or weatherman screws the weather up, and it's not what you thought. So, like, how do you handle that?
That's the type of night I hope I have live eels with me, or if I've been smart enough to check the forecast, see that it's calm, like that's the night you went live eels. That is, I don't do as much eel fishing on the beaches as I used to, but I used to love it, man, especially out on the Cape. It was fun. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something interesting. I don't know if a lot of anglers are still doing that. It seems like eels have become synonymous with rocks. There aren't tons of people doing the eel things on the open beach. I mean, you're talking wide open beach, right? You're talking wide open sand beach.
Oh yeah, dude. I mean, there's like Tony Stetsko who would fish. Like I heard these stories secondhand from Craig Cantelmo, but he said he would fish with Tony, who would fish eels, and like he would basically put his rod tip in the sand to try to keep that line angle low when he was retrieving it, in order to keep that eel from planing up. I mean, that's something you can apply to rocks too, but having that eel crawl along the bottom in the sand is very. There's no reason it wouldn't still work. Striped bass still eat eels.
That's right.
It's just something where I think the slot limits had a lot to do with people like not going to the expense of getting bait anymore. You know what I mean? It's not as. It was easier to justify spending $500 on eels a season when you were either keeping fish or, in some guys' cases, selling them. So I feel like it's kind of tapered off the just recreational bait fishing in the surf.
Yeah.
Other than the daytime guys soaking the frozen sand eels, just 4 rods lined up, that's what they're doing.
Exactly.
So Jimmy, you actually just made me think of something. We were talking about wave action and whitewater. I really rely on a lot of lateral movement of water, like along the beach or through the structure. Is that important to you, and how do you approach that?
Yeah, definitely. Like I always think of it. It's funny when I'm fishing rocks or fishing inlets, you think of it as current. Like on the beach, I always think of it as sweep, just in my head. Like it's how the water is, and the lures are sweeping down the beach. And I think that's really important in terms of where you want to be, where you want to situate yourself to the structure. I love my lures going shallow to deep. I like to have cast on top of the sandbar, have it sweep into the deeper water. Or if there's a trough, maybe I'm fishing rather than just have it come straight across. Maybe I'm a little bit up current of where I want to cast, up current, and I'm casting down current and letting, kind of sweep sideways into the deeper water from the top of the bar. So I think you definitely have to be thinking about that. which direction, the current's moving, and then how you're going to situate yourself in relation to
Yeah,
that.
I think it's really important, actually.
That kind of leads into something I just thought of. You're on a sand beach. Let's say you're working, you're working a stretch of sand that there's multiple bars and bowls and they continue along, and you're trying to find fish. You haven't found any, let's say, in the first couple, and you approach that next, let's say, a bowl, good sized bowl with bars on both ends, good sized deep hole in the middle. How do you work your way through it? Do you just, okay, I'm going to continue the direction that I'm working down the beach? Do you start, like you just said, where you try to come off the shallow into the deep? So if you're walking against the current, do you go to the other side and work your way back in? Like, do you have a somewhat standard approach to start on a new piece of sand structure that you've just arrived at?
In that case, if I came across something that looked beautiful, was holding fish, but I was on the other side of, say, the structure that I wanted to be based on what the current was doing, sometimes, and this is like a weird personal thing, but like, it's like a delayed gratification. Like, the best spot is there, but like maybe I'll find something great before I get to the place where I'm fairly certain they're going to be. When the smart thing would be probably just beeline to that. But I would probably work my way up to like the best spot, and then rather than like go there, not catch anything, and then be like, well, now I don't think they're going to be any. Like, now I've lost confidence in the rest of the structure.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's. I would probably do the other way, where I would fish like the water I liked least first, and then make my way to the stuff where like, now I'm going to get them. It's
no, that's interesting. I'm the opposite. If I've found something, I'm going to start on the pattern that's been the best. But I've done exactly what you said. Where if it didn't produce, maybe I didn't bother with the rest. So I might have to try reversing that. I kind of like that approach to when I'm looking.
It's like you save the dessert. You eat your vegetables first, as one of my friends always says, and then you have the dessert.
And there's something rewarding actually about pulling that fish from that less likely spot too. It's like feels a little bit more significant. It's like you're stealing one from Mother Nature or something.
It is, and you're learning something. You're like, oh, yeah. Like what is the reason that this fish is here right now? Like, maybe this is something I can then replicate somewhere else. Whereas,
which can be just as satisfying as actually catching the fish.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like, I got it. It's that sort of thing. Speaking of things you might walk by, are you a beach lip guy? Do you like the beach lip at all?
No, I don't. I don't think about it much. Like, I'm looking more for further off structure. I'm looking for this. Like, give me a good sandbar, give me a good bowl, give me some cuts in that. And maybe I'm surely missing out on fish by not focusing on the lip, but I mean, where I used to fish in Jersey, South Jersey, like it didn't exist. There was no lip because the beaches were just flat. They were like the Great Plains. But I know Long Island, you see the drone footage now, and it's like unbelievable how the fish are almost with their backs out of the water, grubbing sand fleas, the mole crabs, and some other smaller bait fish. I just don't do it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was curious because that's something that comes up a lot. It seems like online, like disproportionate amount of time. It seems like there's really a thing made of the beach lip, which I'm not saying it's not important. I'm with you as well. It could definitely be super important, and it could be fish, but it seems like it's brought up a lot. So I was just curious.
It might be more of a daytime thing too, where like they're going to be there during the day. If you're trying to pick them off, then I would love to fish the beaches more during the day, but it's just like between work and home, like you just don't have the nighttime is that's Jim's time, so that's when I have to fish.
I'm thinking it. I kind of have the same thought on the lip, but I always have to keep it honest. Like, do you at least take one rip down the beach, maybe, like parallel, or do you like not even bother for the most
No, I will. It's, if nothing else is working, like, let me just flip this one parallel to the beach and see what's happening, but it's not it's usually a desperation move. It's like, oh, okay, well, I'm not getting them there. Let's check this and then go home.
Yeah, no, I always, like, I just have to keep it honest. I've had just enough really good fish come off of that when it's not my primary that I like have to, like Jerry, the night last year when we were out on the sand and you had walked up to me and I just released a good sized fish. That's literally what it was. I fished like where I should have been casting, where I thought they were going to be, and I'm like, what the heck, throw it here. Bang, got the biggest fish of the night for me. And it was like, so that's always sitting in my head, that got to keep it on at least one cast.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
I have one story that's similar to that, but it was not quite. So I was chunking on a beach and had this beautiful cut in sandbar. I had 2 rods set out because it was I could drive on the beach. I drove there, set out the 2 rods, and was like dozing off, and then the one rod like fished the whole outgoing tide, and then with the last 15-20 minutes of the tide, caught a 43-pound fish, beautiful fish. It gets up on the beach and it spits up like the tail of the bunker, one of the bunker that I'd cut off. You cut off the little nubbin of the tail and you just toss it in, like flip it like that. And I was thinking, like, was that fish the entire tide? Was he way closer to the beach and then finally got so low that he bolted out through the cut and then saw the bunker head I had sitting there? So that was one that was like the one example I have where like there was a fish that was probably under my nose the whole time.
Yep.
That I just kind of caught by accident when he was leaving.
It's funny you mentioned that story. You tell that story in reference to chunking, because I've had that happen. I haven't chunked sand beaches in quite a few years, but it'll happen on rocky beaches where I do the same thing. I pitch my tails, my crunched up heads that have been fished through. I mean, I can't throw them that far, but I've had fish either spit them up, or in the past when I was harvesting a fish here and there, they would have those pieces in their belly. And I think the same thing, like how often are those fish sitting at my feet and I'm still trying to bomb my chunk as far as I can?
I know, dude, it's crazy.
Well, yeah, well, great. And the part that Toby didn't tell you about that story, and yes, my camera did cut out for people watching the YouTube. The part that he didn't tell you, Jimmy, is that those stretch of tides, me and a couple of guys I fished with had hundreds and hundreds, if not 1,000 fish between us over a few tides. And like a few tides, I really mean like a few tides. Toby comes out one time, catches the biggest fish of all of us for the entire time. He comes out,
great.
We had 43, 44-inch fish. He comes out, he gets a 47-inch fish. I was like, what the hell? God damn it. I was with my dad, actually. I had pulled my dad down from Maine and had him out, and it was his first few nights in the surf ever, and it was outrageous. And we walked down, and he's like, oh, yeah, I just released the 47. It's like, God damn it. Of course you did.
Oh, man.
Of course.
That's awesome.
And again, just on a keeping the lip stretch honest cast, because I wouldn't.
Right down the beach.
I think I might have had a couple out around like the right spots, and then I was like, what the hell, throw it, see what's there. And it was like within a crank or two, bam, hit the fish.
Oh.
So of course now I have to all the time, even more so, but yeah.
Those fish always feel like they're so hard to replicate. Those like, well, let me just, catch it. Could you do the thing for whatever? You're like, I'm going to do this just for the hell of it. And then you chase that for the rest of your goddamn life, dude, trying to catch that fish again. And it never, I don't know. I have a bunch of those. I can never replicate them.
I think it might have been Daño in one of his books. He even talked about, or maybe an article or something about not keeping if you had to keep every scenario, spot, thing honest as you went along, over time, you're eventually not going to fish your primary because all you're doing is keeping the spots honest in that cast, and I got to replicate this, and they never produce.
That's a great tip. And that is something that I think a lot of guys make a mistake with, because they'll just walk the beach, take 3 steps, cast, take 3 steps, cast. If you do that, you wait. And if you go to change to even just 3 lures, so you do 3 casts with 3 lures and you walk 3 steps, you're going to make it 100 feet and never fish the big pieces of structure, right? Would you agree with that, Jimmy?
Oh yeah, you've got to burn water. You've got to make your choices. Like, okay, this stretch doesn't look too promising. I'm going to keep going until I see something that really jumps out. Because like you said, if you try to incrementally work an entire sand beach, there's just so much. There's so much out there. You're never going to. You got to be way more selective in where you're casting, I think, or go with buddies and kind of leapfrog down the beach with them. That's always if you can get somebody who's up for that, that's not a bad way to go.
So coming from New Jersey, to the sand beaches that you fish now, fishing the rocks quite a bit, is there much crossover? Like, have you learned some of the things from the rock beach fishing that you apply in the sand, or vice versa? Like, is there crossover techniques that you use or make you a better angler, you feel, on the other from what you learned on one on sand versus rocks, or the other way around?
That's a tough one, man. I don't have a clear answer for that. Obviously I'm sure fishing the rocks more, since I moved up to Massachusetts, where I actually have like boulder fields up here in New England, has influenced the sand beach fishing, but it still feels pretty different. I'm using generally smaller lures out on sand beaches. I know the big lures are productive, but I'm kind of, I love fishing bait, dude. If I'm going to bother with rather than throw a big metal lip, I'd rather throw an eel on a sand beach. Whereas in rocks, like I'm more hesitant to break out bait in rocks, but on sand beaches, I'll fish more bait. But yeah, I can't think of too many things that I pull between the two. They feel pretty unique to me, and that's maybe I'm just not looking hard enough at it. But
Hmm. No, I agree. I think there's maybe some subtle things that come along, but yeah, like they are, at least in my opinion, really drastically unique directions and approaches. Yeah.
and I mean, I love the sand beach fishing because it feels like they shouldn't be there. In the rocks, like it looks like classic fish habitat. There's all there's little blackfish, there's porgies, there's crabs, there's so much happening. And you're on this beach and you look behind you and here's all this sand with no evident life on it, behind you. And it just, you're able to cast this small little sliver of ocean and it feels so unlikely that they're going to be there, but they're there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's fleeting. Like all of sand beach fishing feels kind of ephemeral. Like the structure isn't permanent. The bites, especially if you're fishing farther north where the tides are bigger, those fish may only be set up on that corner of that sandbar for 15 minutes and the tide's going to drop 6 inches and you've got to find them all over again. So that's another interesting part of it. Like it just feels, when you get them, you feel like you're kind of getting away with something. Like they're you're beating the odds.
Yeah.
It feels like.
I feel when I'm on the sand beaches a lot of times out here, I feel a little bit of anxiety because it's like, oh my God, I need a teleporter. Like I got to be from here to there. And I'm not even just talking about driving. I'm talking about walking. And you can be on a stretch of beach that has 3 or 4 pieces, a good piece of structure. And the whole time you're fishing one, even if you're getting fish, you're wondering if you should be at the other one, right?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, yeah. And when you lose track of the fish when they move, you're like, I know they're somewhere here. I know did they go into the current? Did they go down current? And so you just kind of like flip a coin and you try to follow them the best you can. And sometimes, like I've had nights where I make the right call the first time, and then other times where I'll walk 100 yards, not get anything, and then double back 200 yards to see if I can catch it. And there they are. Yeah. And you get kind of mad at yourself. You're like, oh man, I just burnt 40 minutes. I could have been catching these fish, but that's all part of the fun of it.
Yeah, the double back is something classic that I do. This really brings up one important thing I want to make sure I ask you personally, because this I'm really curious to hear what you say. How long do you sit on a piece of structure versus move along to another piece of structure? So like, do you really pattern it like that? You're like, I really think this is going to be a 20-minute, 15-minute, 30-minute thing. Or you're like, no, I think fish are moving along the beach. I think if I stay here for 2 hours, because I think, and maybe people don't do this, but I think I know you do, and Toby and I do. When we fish the rocks, it's like, we're going to fish this slice of water. And it's going to be 2 hours, 3 hours, an hour and a half, 45 minutes. But it's like, we're here for this period and we're staying here, we're not moving. How do you treat that on the sand beach?
Yeah, I'm the same way. On rock suit, I'm a barnacle. Like, put me on this rock, I'm going to stay there. And
exactly.
Win, lose, or draw. Like, you have to kind of ignore the like. You should be over there. You should be over there. But like, no, I need to see this out. On the sand, it's kind of the opposite. Like, if I'm not getting quick feedback, I'm like, okay, I need to move. This isn't the time for this. Let's take a walk, or let's get in the car and go to a completely different beach. So maybe 20 minutes, 15 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Does it make any difference the kind of structure you're fishing or the conditions? So like if it's rough water, do you move more? If it's calm water, do you move more?
If it's rough water, I'm probably more inclined to stay put. Like I'm waiting, and it depends on the structure. Like there are places where if just over the years of fishing them, I know that under these conditions on this tide, like there's a good shot that some fish are going to find this piece of structure, and I will sit there and fish that. And if they didn't show up, like, oh, I heard that they were actually at the sandbar 2 miles down the beach. Well, win some, lose some, but that's the rough water. Is like, I'm sitting there waiting because you're waiting for a bigger payoff there. I'm waiting for the big school to move in. Calmer nights are the nights where I tend to do more moving.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, that's kind of how I am too.
No, I think we had talked earlier, mentioning like logbook, and your log isn't really super detailed. Is there any difference? Like, do you log any better or any worse on sand versus the rocky beaches, or is it kind of like your logging is what it is?
It's a little different because on the rocks you can be like, okay, I was on Bill's Rock tonight, so you know the exact. I can go right back there. On the sand, like everything's moving, so I was at Beach X, and I was at this. I was near the lifeguard stand, and I hope that the lifeguards they put it the same place every year. So, so it's a little bit. It's not quite as exact. But I've gotten back into the written logs. I'm trying to do that more because like you miss the little details, like I don't know. Dave ate asparagus last night and it ruined the night, like it's in the wetsuit. Like so I try to get some of those type things back into the log. So
yeah, maybe this is a topic maybe for Toby and I to cover at another point, but I'll just throw it out here. The best thing you can do is just use your phone and talk to a Google Doc. You can just talk to it. You can talk to it in the car on the way home. You just literally, it was this tide, this time, the wind was this, da da da. Oh, this happened and that happened. And oh, today, by the way, my daughter did this and, the dog, whatever. And you can put that all in there and it becomes a journal. And then you just throw it into your Excel file. You just copy and paste it, boom, right in.
I should do that. You wrote that for us in a piece you did for us about logging a couple years ago, and that was the hottest tip in the piece. Was like just do a voice memo because that is so much easier than like sitting down. I take my hard book notebook out and I'm like, nobody bother Dad. Okay, while he writes his thoughts and
feelings. You got
feelings.
your quill pen, you're dipping it into inkwell.
You put the reading robe on. You've got your pipe by the fire.
Exactly. That's how I do it.
Glass of scotch. You're like, it's time to do logging. Sit down, kids, and listen while I spin you a yarn. Yeah. So, Jimmy, people love to hear this, so I'm going to ask it. Does your gear change at all when you're on the beach in terms of rod, reel, line, leader? Like what's your best? What's your best tip there?
I go lighter. I go lighter and I go with a softer rod too. Like I like a moderate, faster rod on rocks. And I feel like it's funny, fishing rocks, I feel like I want more distance, even though often there's good structure close. On the beach, I'm way less interested in casting distance, unless it's a situation like, the bass are blowing bunker out on the outer bar in Monmouth County, and I need to go reach them. But I like a softer rod, because I'm not worried about casting distance, and I know I'm fishing smaller plugs with smaller hooks and lighter line. But since I'm not worried about steering fish away from structure, them getting into trouble. Now that's changing. It changes some with the seals. I'm starting to think I want to bring heavier tackle to maybe put the boots to the fish a little bit more before the seals get on them. It's the seals are one of those things where they're worse than some people think, but maybe not always as bad. I don't know how often I deal with them everywhere now. Like I've gotten sealed in like 4 states now. So it is not only an outer Cape Cod thing. It is an everywhere thing now.
Yeah, it's definitely an everything. I will say this about the seals. We're probably going to steer away from the seals because it seems like it's a hot topic that gets people very upset. But I will say when it comes to seals, if I don't see the seals, I generally don't have as good a fishing these days.
It's the truth. And dude, 100%. This goes to the canal. There are some resident seals in the canal where I hate them. They have stolen some beautiful plugs and some beautiful fish from me. But if they're not there, like, oh, dude, it's not going to be a good day. Yeah,
it's not going to.
It's amazing that the bass don't seem to, unless the bass has no reason to fear the big seal, unless it's, also fighting a rod and reel.
That's right. They don't care. There's lots of drone footage of the bass literally following the seals because the seals disrupt sand eels and everything else, and they dart up like a conga line, like they're like following along behind the seal in a line of fish. But yeah, then when you hook them, then they're kind of screwed, and you've got that freaking seal going back and forth, and there's a freaking wake, and it's charging the beach, and you're backing up, going no, and the whole thing's coming at you. Oh my god,
it's not
crazy.
Fun, dude.
No, and you and I have talked about that. It's like, what do we do? Coyote, all right, well, whatever. I got my rod and a boga and whatever.
Oh, dude, a big coyote's 40 pounds. Like, I can bludgeon that with my boga grip. I'm not worried. I'll take a whole pack of them. But a 500-pound seal, my nightmare is like I'm reaching to land a fish and the seal grabs and one of the hooks grabs me. And I'm in. I played out some. I played out some horrible what if seal scenarios. That's one of my greatest fear.
Man, well now I'm gonna think of that.
Right? Well, I never thought of that. Now I'm not gonna be able to not think of that.
Yeah, that's
you're welcome.
Right. Yeah, and I heard last year someone got bit while they were trying to unhook a fish.
Don't do that to me.
That's the first one I've heard of. It was confirmed. It was I got it from a pretty reputable source. That's the first one I've heard of.
Oh,
that's wild.
See, that was my. People were like, "Oh, no one's ever been bit by a gray seal." I'm like, "Well, someone's going to be first." And who? Yeah. Like, I'm out there all the time among them. Like, of course, it's going to be me. But now I'll be second, I guess. So.
Yeah, a good time not to be first.
Yeah, exactly. What pound leader do you use, Jimmy? I'm curious.
I generally stick to 50 all the time, but I've been scaling down more to 40 on the sand beaches. I think with the smaller plugs, the lighter leader helps them swim a little bit better. So
Yeah, it's really interesting. You said you worry less about casting distance than the sand. I think that's where people become obsessed. But for us, I think we don't often have that fish over the bar situation, right? Where you're trying to reach out over the bar. That's not something that I run into much up here.
no, Long Island, I fished some sand beaches down there where I had a great night with Crazy Alberto years ago where we were chunking initially, and we were down to the structure was pretty far off, and we were all throwing like the big newels and the heaver Hatteras heaver rods, and we had like 2 chunks left. I was like running over to get one of the last ones. Now I was like, no. I was like, now's the time to fish the darter. I'm like, I know what you're doing, Al. Like you want these chunks for yourself. Like you're like, no, put on a super strike darter. Like, sure enough, dude. Like cast out 35-pound fish on the super strike darter on some sand structure. That was an example of the fish being far out on a far piece of structure. But that was a structure there that I guess happens every year to some extent on one of their south-facing beaches. I mean, they have Long Island is I think for big fish on the sand, I think that's tough to beat. Like I would love it to be Cape Cod again, like it was back in the day. But I think that for your shot at a real, like true giant on the sand, it's Long Island now.
It's Long Island. That's interesting because you fished. I mean, you fished a lot, the whole coast. You fished up and down, so that's interesting for you to say.
I mean, and Jersey too. I mean, it's like how many people caught 50-inch fish in Jersey?
Especially recently in the fall with the bunker bites and stuff. Yeah, that's right. Speaking of bunker, really quick too, how much of a match the hatch guy are you on the beach? Because I think even more on sand beaches, a lot of guys get hung up on just fishing the sand eels or just fishing the bunker. Do you focus on that at night, or are you more of a structured generalist or whatever?
I am going there expecting to be fishing on fish eating sand eels. Like that's what I'm planning on. I've got generally a lot of slender stuff in the bag. But you're seeing more bunkers show up in the surf. You're seeing more of that bigger bait or hickory shad. So I've got a couple like larger profile things for that. But for the most part, smaller needlefish, minnow plugs, tons and tons of minnow plugs.
Yeah, you're a big bomber guy. You really are. You love the bomber.
I love the bomber, dude. I love the redfin. I love the mambo minnow. Mambo minnow's been that's been rising to the top of my favorites. Now I think it's because I've got like 3 left. So now it's holding them very closely.
Yeah, interesting.
On the bomber, it's the traditional, the long A, like standard 7-inch, the 6-inch.
I like the 7-inch. I used to love the 6-inch one, the one with the 3 trebles, dropping it down to 2. But I don't feel like it does as well when you put 2 trebles or only 2 instead of the 3 that it comes with. I'd love to figure out like a Reddington style setup. Reddington is that guy who New Jersey, Ron Reddington, who then like takes the guts out of these minnow plugs and reinforces and puts foam in and through wires them. I would love to do that for the 6-inch bomber to see if you could make some sort of magic bullet out of that. But I like the 7-inch one is fine.
Yeah,
I messed around with taking like little weights and like putting it on the center one, like taking an 1/8 of an ounce, or no, even smaller than that. It's like a 32nd of an ounce worm weight and like trimming it down and like hanging it from there with a piece of wire to see if I can balance it. Works okay. Works okay, but it's not the same. You're right. I mean, really, that's a finicky little plug.
If you want to try to fish the 6-inch bomber size, I like the 7-inch. I prefer it as well in general on the bombers. But the A-Salt bombers, which I don't know if they're still being made or if they're
I don't think they make them now.
I have a lot of them because I use them for the sand beaches. That's my go-to on the 6-inch bomber size. I found that worked great with 2 trebles because it came with 2. But even dropping the tail with just a flag and just a single treble on the belly, like if I want to throw, if I'm stepping down the size of my plastic swimmer, that's what I go to first is the A-Salt bombers.
Oh man, I have a couple left, dude. I used to do pretty well on those. It's funny. They're one of those things that like rotated out of the plug bag and I never got them back in again. It was on to the next thing and they just got left behind. There's tons of, everybody does that. I think plenty of lures that worked back in the day. You just kind of don't fish anymore because I don't know, they're just not at the forefront of your mind, I guess.
Yeah, when those hit the market, they were hot everywhere. And like, that's where I fell in love with them. And I didn't fish them for years. When I didn't fish the sand beaches, like when I kind of took a hiatus from fishing the sand, I had like 1 or 2 left. And then I think I had one trip to a vacation. We were fishing sand beaches, and I destroyed the last might have been the last one I had. And then I made a mission and restocked off of eBay, and like now I got a good stock on them again.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, Jimmy, in closing, you had a 50 on the sand, which we all hope to have. And I honestly, more than anything, hope that my 50 does come on the sand. I've thought about it a lot. I would love it to come from one spot in particular that I adore, or from one of the sand beaches that I fish. I really think that there's some poetry to it, as you've sort of alluded to. But can you paint us a picture of when your next 50 on the sand's going to come? What's that going to look like?
I know exactly what I hope it's going to look like, dude.
Okay.
It's going to be me in a lineup of 1 million guys in Monmouth County. Okay. And I'm going to catch it on a pencil popper, and it's going to be beautiful. Everyone else on the beach is going to have one, and we're all going to high five and hug afterwards. So
that's what it's going to be.
I think you just described my nightmare.
Well, dude, you know why I want it there? Because I went down there last October trying to film. So we have a surf fishing series called From the Surf. We put up, a few episodes here and there. And I'm like, I want to go. It's very tough to film surf casting. I know the photography.
Yes, we would love to. Yes.
For you to do what you do with the photography is a lot of work. Like it's tremendous. To do it filming too is also tough at night. And then, you have to be sensitive about spots. But that seemed perfect. Like there's a lot of big fish being caught during the day. They're blitzing. Like everybody's there anyhow. And it had been good for 2 or 3 days. So I drive down from Cape Cod. We have a camera guy, Tommy Riley, and we're like, we can't miss. I'm on the phone to shell carrier. She's like, oh, dude, it's amazing. Hammer him this morning. I get down there, and 2.5 days, it's bad. It was hard. The fishing was brutal. And then I think this guy was messing with me. At the end, he goes, I know where they were yesterday afternoon. You could probably go find them there now. Sends me to Lot G at Sandy Hook, which is the nude beach. And I get up there, I'm like, Tommy, leave the camera in the truck. We can't film this. And we went out there, and you got an eye full of nude sunbathers. And Tommy didn't come with me, and he goes anything worth looking at? I'm like, what do you think, Tom? It's late October on a nude beach in New Jersey. What do you think there was to look at? No, it was mostly men. Okay. So that was I would like a redemption, a 50 there. Even it could be on the nude beach. That'd be fine. So I would like a 50 under the high sun in a blitz. That would be a cool way to get any fish. Would have been a cool thing.
Any fish at all would have been good that day. That's
it would have distracted you from the eye trauma you were experiencing at Lot B or G there.
Oh yeah, my tolerance for that would have been way higher if there were fish.
I'm surprised by your answer, but I love it. I think it's a great, authentic answer. I thought you were going to say it's going to be a nor'easter, and there's going to be bait, and they're going to be finning, and I'm going to know where they're about. You're like, nope, I want to walk down and just...
I want my feet awash in peanut bunker, and I want the bass at my rod tip. That's all I want. Everybody got it last year. Why didn't Jim? So I want it.
That's funny.
Well, you did set up the classic scenario of there's fish. You're getting multiple calls. You finally make the run. I mean, we've all been there.
Yeah.
I fortunately haven't had it happen to me when I had camera crew in tow. Which yeah,
it just happened to Toby and I, though. It just happened. I mean, it's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing. So, Jimmy, thank you so much. This was fantastic.
Oh, this is a lot of fun.
We love having you. We will definitely make sure that we have you back. There's so much to talk about. This is like a drop in the bucket of what we could talk to you about. We hope that everyone enjoyed the conversation. We hope everyone will consider subscribing to On the Water Magazine and check out all your online content, your new surf fishing series that at the time of recording this has just come out, right, Jimmy?
Yeah, so we've got 5 episodes of it out right now. We did the last one we just did was with Steve Gallant on the North Shore of Massachusetts. It filmed last year.
Yep. It just came
excellent
out.
Episode. When Jerry and I just fished together the other night, we were talking about it. I think it had just recently come out. So excellent episode. So definitely look forward to more of those for sure.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming. Yep. We wish you a good season. Wish you another 50, and maybe I'll see you in the sand, but I'll probably be hiding if I do.
That's okay. I'll be the one yelling at the coyotes, dude. So
okay. Great.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
This has been a weekly edition of the Surfcast Podcast. You can find out more about the podcast at surfcastpodcast.com, or definitely check us out on social media, Facebook, Instagram, at the Surfcast Podcast.